Have you noticed that 40-year-old women today no longer look like the 40-year-old women of the past? I'm not talking about plastic surgery or Instagram filters. I'm talking about something deeper, more interesting, and let's face it, more frightening for those who still think aging is synonymous with invisibility. Millennials have turned the tables and created a completely new version of what it means to be in this decade of life. So if you think you know what to expect from your 40s, prepare to have your certainties shaken. I'm Carol. I'm 40 years old, and I confess that when I was younger, I thought I would reach this age wearing beige linen sets and orthopedic shoes, but something happened along the way. My generation simply refused to follow the script they were selling us. And the result? We're creating completely new rules about how this phase can be lived. If you want to understand how to stay ahead of other women who are still trapped in outdated standards of elegance and maturity, subscribe to the Lucrative Elegance channel, hit the notification bell, and leave a like. Because here you won't just learn to be elegant, you'll learn to transform your elegance into something lucrative, whether in your personal, professional, or social life. And believe me, this makes all the difference when you realize that other women are still trying to decipher codes you've already mastered. Remember Miranda in Sex and the City? When the series premiered in 1998, she was 34 years old, but the character was treated as if she were nearing retirement. Short, practical hair, masculine suits, zero sensuality. It was as if in her early 30s, a woman already had to choose between being taken seriously or being feminine. So women of that era lived a kind of anticipated mourning of their own youth. But millennials said no, we won't accept this ready-made narrative. Pay attention to this now, because this changes everything. It turns out that my generation grew up watching baby boomers and Generation X enter their 40s as if entering a tunnel with no return. For those women, turning 40 meant cutting their hair short, wearing more serious clothes, dull pastel tones, and adopting the posture of someone who could no longer afford to be interesting. It was almost an unwritten social code. You aged, therefore you disappeared. But for millennials, the game has changed completely. And whoever hasn't understood this change is still playing by the old rules. Here's a fact that few people know. Recent dermatology studies show that women born in the 1980s and 1990s have visibly younger skin than their mothers had at the same age. And it's not just genetics. It's skincare with hyaluronic acid, sunscreen used religiously from an early age, red LED light at aesthetic clinics, and a completely different approach to self-care. They don't do lymphatic drainage because they want to lose weight. They do it because they understand that fluid retention also retains opportunities, including social ones. It's not empty vanity, it's aesthetic longevity, and this is a gigantic paradigm shift. Sounds simple? But that's where the mistake lies for those who still haven't understood the new elegance. I'll tell you something I saw with my own eyes. An acquaintance of mine, 42 years old, wears mid-rise jeans, minimalist white sneakers, and a beige silk blouse, hair with natural highlights, hydrated skin, no heavy foundation. She doesn't look like a 20-year-old girl. She looks like a 42-year-old woman who knows exactly who she is. She never walks hurriedly, but also never seems too available. When she crosses her legs, she does it as if she knows she's being watched. She speaks slowly, not because she has time, but because she has control. And that, my dear, is much more powerful than looking young. So the question was never about going back in time. It was about creating a better version of now. Now listen to this carefully. 40-year-old millennials aren't wearing low-rise jeans and getting keratin treatments like they did in the 2000s. They've evolved. Now they invest in facial treatments, see dermatologists, know the difference between retinol and glycolic acid, but at the same time, they haven't abandoned authenticity. Less heavy makeup, more real skin, more invisible care. It's an elegance that doesn't shout, but definitely speaks. Think of women like Gwyneth Paltrow, who at 52 still wears ripped jeans and sneakers, but pairs them with a structured blazer and delicate jewelry. Or Eva Mendes, who at 51 appears in a long flowing dress, natural loose hair, and that air of someone who's not trying to prove anything to anyone. Anne Hathaway, 42, wears very high heels with tailored pants and a basic white t-shirt. These women don't look like girls. They look like sophisticated, confident, and mature versions of themselves. And that's exactly what the new woman in her 40s is looking for. Here's the trick that few people understand. Elegance without stuffiness is about balance. Millennials have learned that they don't need to dress like old ladies to be taken seriously. So they mix pieces. Oversized blazer with destroyed jeans, scarpin heels with a basic white t-shirt, structured leather bag with athletic sneakers. The secret is in the intelligent contrast. It's conscious choice, not desperate disguise. While some still cling to trends that only work on TikTok feeds, the 40-year-old woman who understands her worth invests in what no one can copy: presence and silent elegance. But there's something even more interesting happening beneath this aesthetic change. The behavior of 40-year-old millennials is completely different from previous generations. They don't apologize for growing up. They're not ashamed to say they earn well, that they like comfort, that they're tired of pleasing everyone. They have a sharp gaze. They observe everything, analyze in silence, and speak little, only when it's really necessary. And when they speak, it's surgical. Pay attention to this now. I recently read a report in American Vogue that said something fascinating. 40-year-old millennial women are among the most demanding consumers in the luxury market. They know what they want, don't accept just anything, and don't buy on impulse. They buy timeless pieces, invest in quality, and ignore passing trends. So they're not easily influenced. They influence. And this is a huge difference between being seen and attracting attention. They want to be seen, but on their own terms. And here lies an interesting contradiction. Social pressure still exists. Society still tries to push standards: perfect marriage, children, thin body, eternal youth. But 40-year-old millennials have created a mental filter. They edit what they hear. They only let in what matches their own truth. And that, my dear, is a form of power that few previous generations had the courage to exercise. The new elegance is selective. It's not about pleasing. It's about keeping your own narrative intact. It's about choosing what serves you and what doesn't, and discarding without guilt what doesn't make sense. This woman doesn't want to look young. She wants to look like the best version of herself, and she understands that charm has no age, and that beauty begins in the way you behave, not in the size on your clothing label. Now, if you're realizing that you want to master these visual, behavioral, and social codes that make a woman be seen, treated, and respected in a completely different way, I need to tell you about my course Look Rich Without Spending Much, because it's one thing to theoretically understand what makes a woman look rich, sophisticated, and elegant. It's another thing to know how to apply this in practice, in your daily life, with the clothes you already have in your closet. In this course, you'll learn exactly what the secret codes are that wealthy women use to be immediately recognized wherever they are. And I'm not talking about buying designer bags. I'm talking about haircut, posture, way of speaking, choice of fabrics, color combinations, the right accessories. Things that completely transform the way you're perceived and treated in the world. And look, the price is promotional right now. So if you want this real transformation, this is the time. The link is in the description. Back to our topic. There's one thing that has always caught my attention. Women in their 40s from past generations seemed tired, as if carrying their age was a heavy burden. But 40-year-old millennials seem awake. They have energy, they have purpose, they have clarity. They've lived long enough to know what they don't want, and that is pure freedom. I'll give you a practical example. I recently met a woman, 41 years old, who works at a tech company. She wears black tailored pants, white cotton shirt, black leather flats, minimalist watch, and a small structured bag, hair in a low casual bun, zero makeup besides nude lipstick. She doesn't look too formal, doesn't look sloppy. She looks exactly what she is, a competent, confident, and elegant woman. And you know what happens? She walks into a room and people pay attention, not because she's screaming for attention, but because she emanates something you can't buy: presence. Here's an uncomfortable truth that no one likes to admit. Previous generations were taught that at 40 you had to accept your place as a supporting character, but millennials simply ignored that script. They continue to be protagonists of their own lives. They continue dreaming, planning, building, and that changes everything. Meanwhile, there are people the same age desperately trying to wear crop tops and platform sandals as if they were still in college. Does it look young? No, it looks confused. The difference between aging well and desperately trying to look 25 is that one of these choices gives you power, and the other takes it away. This is important. There's a surprising fact. According to the Beauty Research Institute of the United States, women between 35 and 45 years old spend more on skincare than any other age group. But what's interesting isn't how much they spend. It's why. They're not trying to look younger. They're trying to look healthy, rested, cared for. It's a completely different approach. So the goal has changed. And when the goal changes, the result also changes. Millennials know that true youth lives in the attentive gaze and the posture of someone who has lived long enough not to need to prove anything to anyone. They don't justify themselves. They don't explain themselves. They simply exist, with confidence and elegance. And that scares those who are still stuck in the old mentality that women after 40 have an expiration date. Here's another thing that few people notice. 40-year-old millennials know how to use technology, know how to communicate well, know how to negotiate. They grew up in two worlds, analog and digital, so they have a huge advantage over previous generations. They understand new and old codes, and they use this in their favor, including in the work environment, where they're setting new standards. They no longer accept being interrupted in meetings. They no longer accept earning less than men in the same position, and they no longer accept smiling when they're uncomfortable just to be called nice. Think about it. A 40-year-old woman today can be on Instagram showing elegant looks, can be at a business dinner closing deals, can be at the gym doing Pilates, can be reading a philosophy book at a cafe. She moves between universes with ease, and that is power. But there's a side where it's not all roses. External pressure still exists. Society still looks askance at 40-year-old women who don't follow the traditional script. There are still people who find it strange when you don't have children, when you're not married, when you earn more than your husband, when you travel alone. But millennials have developed an invisible armor. They've learned not to absorb other people's opinions as absolute truth. And this changes everything. There's a phrase I read in a New York Times article that sums it up perfectly. 40-year-old millennials don't want to be young again. They want to be powerful now. And this shift in focus is revolutionary. Because when you stop trying to go back in time and start building something solid in the present, everything changes. Now comes the interesting part. While Gen Z is learning codes of behavior through short videos and passing trends, 40-year-old millennials have already internalized these codes through decades of observation, trial, error, and refinement. They know that the power of silence is greater than the power of speech. They know that less is more. They know that elegance isn't about quantity, it's about quality. And most importantly, they know that no one needs to know everything about you to respect you. In fact, the less they know, the better. The truth is that my generation is redefining what it means to age with elegance. And it's not about Botox, fillers, or surgery. It's about attitude, conscious choices, and firm refusal to accept ready-made narratives that no longer serve us. So if you're in this age range or approaching it, know that you have the power to write your own script, and it can be infinitely more interesting than anything they tried to sell you. If you enjoyed this content and want to continue receiving information that puts you ahead of other women, consider becoming a channel sponsor through the membership club with prices starting at $4.99. Click the Become a Member button. Your support makes all the difference, so we can continue bringing exclusive, honest, and truly transformative content about elegance and personal development. The next time you walk into a room, enter as a woman who is 40 years old and no longer needs to ask permission to exist. Because that's the only thing no one can copy from you. The certainty that you've already paid the price of experience, and now you're reaping the fruits of your own power.